It's ding ding, two men in a ring. We put pride in your stride and a quiver in your liver. You want 'em, we've got 'em, coming to you. Loud and proud, he's the biggest, he's the baddest. It's Mr. Gavin Davis on the Gavin Davis Podcast Show.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Gavin Davis Podcast with me and my co-host, Mr. Dave Bruff. It's introduction time for tonight's guest. He has over 30 years experience in the health and fitness industry and 20 years as an American College of Exercise certified personal trainer. He graduated with a 2-1 honours degree in leisure and sports management from Manchester University. He has managed public and private health clubs and currently runs his own health hut, assisting his clients along their health and fitness journey. He gained a black belt in British Jiu-Jitsu in his early 20s and later utilized the gym to help his passion for cycling and became a master trainer for Kaiser Cycling. Now in his 50s, he maintains strength and power for health and longevity reasons, for regular weights, kettlebells, outdoor boot camp sessions. His aim is to award himself and his participants with a longer, healthier, and more enjoyable life. Me and Dave want to welcome to the podcast my friend, Mr. Gary Jones. Gary, welcome, mate.
Hi, guys. Hi, Gav. Hi, Dave. Thanks for having me. Yeah. Looking forward to it.
Okay, mate. So what we're going to do, just for the viewers at home, we're going to look at your background and your educational experience and your sporting interests, mate. So just when you're ready, just take us back to the beginning, a bit of your background.
Yeah, well, right. Well, to be honest, if you go back to my school days, it was a bit checkered, to be honest. And I felt not let down by the education system, but felt like I enjoyed certain things, didn't enjoy other things. And if I didn't enjoy it, I didn't do it. And that's more or less carried on right throughout my life. In terms of sporting, I did the regular sports in school, but my dad's always played table tennis. So at a young age, 8 or 9, I started to play table tennis, got pretty good at it. Number 2 in North Wales, top 10 in Wales as a junior. Loved the sport, but felt when I was getting sort of into my mid-teens, it wasn't physical enough for me. So really, I think the main reason I changed sports from table tennis to jiu-jitsu was when I was playing in a competition and I just smashed my bat off the table and it snapped in half and basically wanted to run around and grab the other opponent because I'd lost the game. And I just said to my dad, I said, that's it. I said, I've had enough. So basically just stopped playing table tennis at about 16, 17. And that's when I thought I need something more physical. So 1989, I think I was about 17 years of age, I started doing jiu-jitsu and basically just fell in love with it. Felt like, my physique and everything was well suited to the sport. Started off as you do when you go to any club, a little bit shy, a little bit thinking, God, everyone else is great, and am I really going to fit in here? But then, basically, I think when I got my white belt and was training for my yellow belts, I was training with brown belts and I was training with black belts, and I just gelled with the sport. Along that journey, I started to do a bit more weight training. So and football. 19 October 1992, I got my black belt in jiu-jitsu, and I think that took me about 89. So just about 3 years. But during that 3 years, the only downside was I had a bit of a sort of collarbone injury. So I was out for about 6 months.
Yeah.
So yeah, they were my main sports up until sort of my early 20s. Other education, obviously I did a BTEC in sports and leisure coaching. And then, as you've already said, a degree in sports and leisure management at Manchester University. The management side of it, like I said, I've managed public and private fitness facilities, but to go into a meeting and start discussing budgets and, marketing, just didn't float my boat, and I didn't enjoy it. What I enjoyed was being on the shop floor with the customers, changing their lives through exercise and fitness, and running boxercise classes, running circuit training classes, running competitions, the fitness challenge we used to have at the centre. So, my love for fitness sort of stemmed from then. So that's when really I set up my personal training, Classy Personal Training, in 2004. And I haven't really looked back since. Love being my own boss. One of the downsides working in leisure facilities is you work evening shifts, you work weekends. So I did my time of about 8-10 years of that, and then just felt working for myself was fitted perfectly with my lifestyle. Then I got into cycling in a big way. So all my training then changed from the weights to jiu-jitsu. I think I stopped jiu-jitsu probably in my sort of when I finished university. When I was in Manchester University, I used to go down to Knutsford and train with Jimmy Pape's club. So, but it was as and when, it wasn't really regular enough. When I actually trained to get my black belt in jiu-jitsu, I was training 3 or 4 times a week. And I felt that's when I really sort of progressed and got good at it. But then when I was just throwing a session in here and there, I don't do that. If I'm doing something, I've got to do it to its full. So that's when I really sort of knocked it on the head and thought, I haven't got the time to do it. So I got into cycling. Did a few events, John O'Groats to Land Ends, a few cycle sportives, and then my training sort of changed. Currently, pre-COVID, I started almost full circle and got back into table tennis after years and years of my dad telling me to get back into table tennis. I just fancied a change again. So from doing maybe 10 or 15 years of cycling, where your weekends, you're going out 7 o'clock in the morning, doing 100 miles on the bike, and it's taking 5 or 6 hours of your day up. You're coming back, you're absolutely slaughtered. You don't want to do anything else apart from eat, sleep, and, relax. My son was getting a little bit older, so just changed that again and started doing the table tennis, which I'm really enjoying. But as the jiu-jitsu, now I'm finding it difficult to find time to train 4 or 5 times a week on the table tennis to improve my skills, etc., because I can't do something just half-heartedly. So it's a bit of a frustration at the moment, because I think I'm better at table tennis than I am.
Right, okay.
Which is annoying. A lot of cross training. That's where I am at the moment for longevity. So by cross training, I don't mean CrossFit, I mean cross training. So I do CV, strength, flexibility, and mobility. So a rounded program. So if I want to go out on the bike, I can do the bike. If I want to play table tennis, I can do table tennis. I'd probably struggle to get on the mat and do anything at the moment, but I'd give it a go. So that's a brief introduction.
Last time you got on the mats with me, you couldn't get off the sofa for a week, could you, with your neck?
Yeah, they're trying to get out of a headlock. Yeah.
Okay, mate. So I just want to look at, with the jiu-jitsu.
Yeah.
Let's go back to the jiu-jitsu, right? What did you feel were the pros and cons to the training that you went through with your jiu-jitsu?
I've had to think about this. I watched one of your other podcasts, and you were talking about traditional jiu-jitsu to BJJ, Brazilian jiu-jitsu, and different things. And you talked about how it's all changed. I basically started jiu-jitsu because I wanted to be able to look after myself a bit more. I'm not the biggest guy. I used to go out, used to always get hassle, but I wasn't someone who would walk away from it. So I thought, well, if you're not willing to walk away, then you got to be able to stand up and either deal with it. So it wasn't that I wanted any trouble or any hassle, but I thought I'll try jiu-jitsu, the art of self-defense. And yeah, it worked. There was a number of times I got into sort of situations where it paid off. But I loved the training because I think it was partly due to the instructor. A guy called, Paul Gagan was the main instructor, who I got on really well with. But a guy who took most of our sessions during my training to be a black belt was a guy called Simon Rimington. You know him, Gav?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I remember him.
yeah. He was.
Yeah.
I got on really well, but you know, he was good on the mat. He was fast. He was big. You know, he was powerful, and I just tried to emulate him, which I did. But when I look back now about the jiu-jitsu, um, I can see how it has changed, because when I was on the mat, it didn't matter whether you were same age, same physical strength and ability of me, or whether you were someone in your 40s or someone in your 50s. If you were in a lineup to be thrown, you were getting the same throw as the next person. You know, when you're 17 or 18, you don't think that that person you're slamming into the mat maybe have to get up the next day and do a full-time job or work, or a family to look after. So I do, yeah, I have some regrets, but at the end of the day, that's what I was there for. I was there to have a real physical workout, which we did, you know, on a Tuesday night and a Saturday morning. It was a right workout. So when you got on that mat, there was no stop. You know, it was throws, grappling, learning syllabus stuff, off syllabus stuff. And yeah, I just loved it.
Did you find, when you got into altercations in the street, did you find the syllabus stuff related to that, or was it more get in, get your strikes off quick, create distance? Was there any like techniques that you got off or that you actually gravitated to?
Yeah, a lot of chokes. You know, when you got into grappling, it was, you know, it was a sleeper
Right.
hold and that type of thing.
Yeah.
You know, I was doing a lot of weights. I was quite strong. So yeah, it was more, you know, that was it. You know, it was but it was far and few between. But it was more of a confidence within yourself. You thought, well, if it does go, you know, Pete Tong, then you know how to sort of guard yourself, you know how to look after yourself. But you know, I'd be the first person to get out of a situation. You know, if I could walk away from a situation, I could sense it when it was coming off, and 9 times out of 10, I'd be gone. You know, I'd be like, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it's. I don't think you talk about your rookies and that type of thing going with the throws. Yeah, it was a little, you know, there were certain people that would be hanging on to you, clinging on to you, other people that, you know, you could really hit. So you got to know who you wanted to train with and who you didn't want to train with. But, you know, like Simon, the instructor, I just thought I really enjoyed training with him. Apart from the one time I went to his place down in Broughton or Chester way, and that's where I dislocated the collarbone. You know,
right. Okay.
so that was a bit of a nightmare.
Yeah. Hey, Gary. I would like to talk about your time in the USA with the wrestlers and how you found that, and what you thought of their kind of level of athleticism and discipline.
Oh, that's a great question. This is a great question, because it's a really, really, you know, it's one of those experiences in my life that, you know, I'll never forget. And we're looking now 25 years ago, you know, for 25 years, I've been saying to myself, I've got to go back. I've got to go back. And I've never been back, which is, you know, family, jobs, everything else. But yeah, basically, I think we were at a funeral. We were at my dad's uncle's funeral, and his brother came over, who lived in who lived in Philadelphia. I got talking, and he said my second cousin, Neil Alton, who was big into his wrestling, his 2 sons now wrestle in Penn State University, or one of his sons does, was on the Penn State team. He said, oh, my son's got a gym. Why don't you come over? And so at that period of time, I was looking for a placement in the university, 3rd year of university, which was a 12-week applied study period. So I was lucky enough to get a place out. Well, I say lucky enough. I got a place in my cousin's gym in a place called Lock Haven, which is about 3 or 4 hours sort of east of New York. And it was an experience and a half. We could do a full podcast on that 3 you know, that 12 weeks out there. But talking about the wrestling, within his gym, obviously there was the wrestling team trained, and one guy in particular who I've become quite good friends with was a guy called Kerry Colat. At the time, he was probably in his weight category. He was 63 kgs weight category. He was one of the the number 1 or 2 in the US, and he was sort of pushing for Olympics and everything else. I think he'd come from Penn State University, which was one of the top universities in America, because they call it the top 10 universities. And basically, he'd gone to Lockhaven, which was a small town. So whether it was in the second division, but he was just beasting everybody. He was an awesome athlete. In terms of athleticism, the guy was 63 kgs, but naturally probably 70 kgs. And before a fight, you'd see him in the gym, sweatsuit, on the bike, in the sauna, sweatsuit, on the bike, in the sauna, dropping 12, 15 pounds quite easily in an evening before a weigh-in. He was super strong. I just remember doing some sort of weights with him, and the guy, for someone his size, he could bench press 120 kgs for like 3 to 5 reps. He was a freaking animal. So you're thinking, if he's going on the mat with someone who's 63 kgs, he's just going to destroy him, because he was stronger than most bloody 80, 90 kg guys. And it was the whole, it's like whether you've ever been to America and college stuff in America, but it's just the whole, the way they actually do things. So it'd be like a Friday night or a Saturday night, and the college team would be wrestling. The whole town would be going up there. And the next thing, the 2 teams would come in. The next thing, everyone's standing up, and the bloody national anthem's being played. So it's like, you felt like you were almost at the Olympics. So, that's enough to psych the team up. It's like you're hearing your national anthem, and it was really professional. I'll say there were professionals to a certain degree, because this guy, Kerry, I remember one day we went to Pittsburgh. That was his hometown. That was where he was from. And they were sort of wrestling Pittsburgh. We drove down on the Friday, and literally we went out all night. And I, saying, you need to go home. You need to go. No, I'm fine. So we were in the Hooters bar. We were drinking all night. We were wasted. Next thing, he gets up, and I'm thinking, there's no way this guy's going to be able to bloody perform. He just gets on the mat, pins his guy within the first round. He was that far and above. He was basically fighting at a lower level, but he was awesome. A nice guy as well.
Yeah, the level of the way they breed sports in the colleges out there in America is different level to what we're doing over here from an educational point of view.
Yeah, massively.
Yeah, massively, yeah.
Yeah, so it was also along that, there was another guy who was a strength coach from Michigan University. And this was my first experience of what is truly high intensity training. It's all out there now. HIIT, HIIT, so HIIT training, high intensity interval training, MetaFit and all that, which is great. I love them. I love grit. I love MetaFit. But my first experience of high intensity training, I remember it was over 25 years ago. I remember coming back to Plasmatic Gym when I was managing it, and I was getting all the guys, how to do sort of one set to complete failure. And this strength coach came in. He was a friend of Carrie's and a friend of Neil's. And literally, he took us through like the high intensity training they do with the American footballers and the American basketball teams. And it was a purely strength training program. So just quick example, put me on the leg press machine. So you get on the leg press machine, you're fully warmed up, you've done a couple of warm-up sets, and then you just go to complete failure. But we don't mean complete failure that you're struggling to push the weight up. We mean you got 2 guys either side, so you're doing about 8 reps, and then you're really sort of struggling to get the weight up. So they push you up for a couple of reps with you. So then you've gone to what we call positive failure. So you can't push that weight anymore. But not only did they take you that level, then you do another rep where you lower it down, and they would keep pushing you until you actually struggle to negatively lower the weight down. So negative failure as well. And it's the only time I've ever got off a machine and not been able to walk.
Yeah.
But yeah, but it's one set. It's just one set. So one set of the exercise, and that's your legs done. You know, your quads, your glutes, but it's that high intensity, and that's the way they do it with a lot of the American football teams, because you know most of their training is done on the field, running drills, doing sort of speed work, doing skill work. So when they go in the gym, you know, 90% of them are natural athletes anyway. They don't have to touch a weight, and they're bulging out of their bloody tops and shorts. But you know, they keep it quite low volume, high intensity. So yeah, so you know, I do incorporate some of that in my training now. If I haven't got much time, then you know, I think about intensity rather than volume. So you know, it was a great experience. I really enjoyed it.
So from that point then, and that experience, how's your training for yourself as you get older evolved?
Um, Well, if we just go reverse back to those Saturday mornings when I used to do the jiu-jitsu, it was literally 2 hours of blood, sweat, and guts on the mat. So, you know, for most people, and for me now, or for any athlete, I would say as a trainer, well, that's it. Bit of recovery time now, get in the sauna, relax, you know, maybe a massage, come back maybe 5 or 6 o'clock if you want to do some mobility, flexibility work or skill training if they wanted, or that would be it for the day. I used to do that, jiu-jitsu, 10 till 12. Then I'd pop straight down to the gym, 12 till 1, do some weights, upper body or abs. Then have something to eat. Then I'd cycle up to the local football team where I'd play football 3 till 5. And I remember the coach saying to me, "God, you tired? You seem tired today." And I'd be like, "No, I'm all right. You know, I'm all right." But when I look back, it was just way too much to be doing, you know, that amount of exercise on a Saturday. And then, so that's not smart training. And then what's definitely not smart is then probably on a Sunday, I'd get up with my local team and play football again. And 9 times out of 10, that was slightly hungover. So, you know, that was ridiculous. But then basically in my early 20s, you know, I just started to think a little bit more sensible about my training. You understand the principle of overload, and recovery and active recovery. So my program was quite structured. Like I said, I stopped going before a football match. I wouldn't do any weights the day before. You know, the night before or the 2 days before, I wouldn't do any leg exercises. But I just loved pushing weights. So I just loved working out in the gym. So yeah, that was when I sort of started using periodization for my training. So having a long-term goal and then splitting it down into shorter monthly targets. And then obviously that would then be sort of the shorter segments would be then what I was doing throughout the week. So it was giving myself plenty of rest. It was quite structured and quite organized.
How are you regarding injuries, Gary? Have you had any long-term injuries, or have you kept relatively injury-free?
Yeah, no, touch wood. I think the dislocated collarbone is the only one. I had a inguinal hernia operation about 15 years ago, but that wasn't anything major. So that's it. They're the only two. The cycling, the one reason I moved away from so much cycling, because I was doing 4 or 5 bike rides a week, and you know, some long rides. It was just constantly, I just felt my back was constantly aching. No matter, I'd be constantly stretching out on the foam roller, having massages. But that comes with endurance sport. You know, you're sitting on a bike, your hip flexors get tight, your hamstrings get tight, you get an imbalance between your quads and your glute and your hamstrings. So if you want to be a good cyclist, you've got to sort of cross train and do other stuff, which I did. You know, I did some weights. I always did some weights when I was cycling, but I still felt, you know, I was constantly having backache. So I still cycle now, but I don't do anywhere near as much as I did.
Yeah. Dave, about 20 years ago, I went on the bikes with Gary, And do you remember, Gary? Yeah.
Yeah, I remember. Yeah, I
And
remember.
they took me on this ride, and I would consider myself cardio wise quite fit, especially during them times. And I hit the wall, Gary, didn't I?
Oh yeah, big style.
Yeah. He had to give me one of them. What was it? One of the sugar.
The gels, yeah,
Yeah,
the
he had to give me a
energy
gel.
gels.
He got me back to the car, and then I had a date that night. I was supposed to take this girl out on a date, right? I had to phone her up and cancel because I had to go home to bed. I've never felt anything like it in my life. I'd never had that in training before in jiu-jitsu. So it was a really unique experience to feel hitting the wall.
Yeah, it's it's there's with exercise, it depends what you're doing. Like maybe we'll talk a little bit about BGA, MMA training later on. But basically, exercise. I got this from a guy called Andy Galpin. I listen to a lot of his podcasts. I do a lot, watch a lot of his videos. He's the professor of kinesiology in California State University. This guy, the stuff he knows is unreal. He's really good. So he's got 9 fitness adaptations that he states. They're not mine. Everybody knows them, but they're number 1 is skill and technique. Number 2 is speed. 3 power. 4 strength. 5 hypertrophy. 6 muscle endurance. 7 anaerobic capacity. 8 maximum aerobic capacity, and then 9 long duration steady state fitness. So them elements, obviously, through my training. Now you're asking me how my training is. Those basically, for those, the bottom 3 were what I was cycling. They were mainly anaerobic capacity, so your high intensity sort of short burst sprints. Maximum aerobic capacity was your VO2 max, where possibly you get on the bike and you go out and do some training. You do 5 to 8 minute hill, and you're sort of pushing yourself just to the point of your sort of sub VO2 max, your sub threshold training, where you're blowing out your backside. It's horrible. And then you come back down, 5 minute recovery, and you do that and repeat and repeat and repeat. So it's tough work, but it gets you fit and it gets you good on a bike. And then long duration, steady state, they're your recovery rides, where you go out on a weekend and you just go for a nice long 2-3 hour ride, low intensity. But they're the important part of cycling, which not a lot of cyclists do. They will do all the hard stuff. But
so when we look at MMA conditioning, or like jiu-jitsu, so with jiu-jitsu, like, I feel that I can grapple. I can go and do a 2-hour session. I can grapple for 2 hours if I need to. Obviously, 5-minute rounds, 1-2 minute rest. Yeah, it's hard work, but I feel that it's very sports specific, and I'm catered for that because I do that most nights of the week.
Yeah.
What would you say for MMA conditioning is the best way to go from like a fitness point of view? Because when I was fighting, especially pro MMA, I feel this is where I let myself down a little bit, because I didn't do any gym work. I would be, everything I did was on the mats, and then I go for a run maybe, or a swim. I got in my best shape when I was swimming, but I go for a run and I might do a few pull-ups on the park when I was doing a run, maybe 6-10 pull-ups, something like that, and then I carry on with my run.
Mm-hmm.
Apart from that, I wouldn't do any strength and conditioning or anything like that, where a lot of the lads now are really extending out with the strength and conditioning.
Yeah. We're going back to those 9 fitness adaptations that we talked about just a few minutes ago. With MMA, it's not my baby, to be honest. I watch it and I think, you're freaking mad. These guys going into the ring. Even when you did it a few times, it's like just there was a bit of, I watched on YouTube not long ago, and this Andy Galpin was doing some actual muscle biopsies and fitness tests on all these MMA stars. I didn't know them. Obviously, they were the top MMA sort of athletes, fighters, and just briefly come out with, the conclusion he came out with was they were just made up differently to everybody else. These world top MMA athletes were just built, not like American footballers, not like basketballers, not like anything. They're like a different human being. They were just mental. They were just, and it was coming out of their DNA. It was in their DNA. He was saying it was just, it was actually, and we watched this one guy trying to do it was like a maximum sprint on the bike. Well, he almost snapped the bike in half, whereas a cyclist would have been quite strict. This guy, the bars were bending, it was shaking. He was like screaming. But that's how they roll. That's how they train. So yeah, out of those, for the MMA, I think it hits nearly all 9 of those fitness adaptations. You've got to, well, first of all, skill and technique. It's massive. It's massive. Speed, yeah, you got to be fast. You got to have power. You got to have strength. The only one you don't have to have, really, or you don't have to train for, is hypertrophy. Because guess what? That comes with all your training. There's not one person that goes on that mat, MMA, that doesn't look in shape. But we are talking about professional athletes here. It's like the you watch the athletes on the track. They're all slightly different shapes, but they're all in great shape. But none of them train to be in great shape. It's a byproduct of their training for their specific sport.
Yeah. I think with the jiu-jitsu, I think that because with regard to isometric training, there's a lot of lads, and I remember watching a documentary on Dan Gable, the famous wrestler, and he used to do a lot of isometric training.
Dan Gable.
All right, yeah. Dan Gable. Yeah. Right, so where the Gable grip comes from and everything. I think he won a gold medal in 72 or 76. Right. And one of the greatest wrestlers that's ever come out of America. And he did a lot of isometric training. Yeah. Which relates well to the BJJ and the grappling, I find.
Yeah, obviously you're in that position, aren't you? Isometric training, it's a static contraction.
Yeah.
If you've got someone in a grip, and you're holding them in that grip, your muscles contracted, but it's not moving. So it's an isometric contraction.
Yeah.
It makes perfect sense to be doing sort of a lot of that stuff, or a leg lock, or you've got someone in the scissors with the legs, you got to be able to hold them in that position. So it's pointless you being able to press them up and down, and that's why these, exercises so specific to the activity you're doing,
so you wouldn't go for, like, if you were in the gym doing, let's say, a bench press, right? Would you go 6 reps, or would you go 1 or 2 reps max strength on that? If you were training for like a martial art, would you say?
Yeah, I'd go, depending on what first of all, I'd look at the person you're working with. Are they naturally strong? Are they naturally fast? Are they weak? Are they powerful? And you'd weigh it up, and you'd sort of say, right, this guy, he's an animal. He is super strong. So I wouldn't put him on there to do a strength training program, which would be 3 to 5 reps, maybe 5 to 7 sets. But I might do, right, he's strong, but he's a bit slow. He's a bit sluggish. So I'd probably put him on more of a power training. So have him well rested and just get him on the bench and maybe do 10 sets of 1 to 3 reps, So he's getting 10 1 rep first reps, basically. So he's fresh, and he's there, and he's pushing super fast, powerful movements with, when you're talking power, the rule of thumb is, you've got all the technology, depends on where the person is, but basically if you go around about 30-40% of their 1 rep max. So if this guy could press 100 kgs, for power, you're looking at more 40-50 kgs. Of him pressing maybe 40 kgs. So you get him to press maybe 3 times. But the thing is with power, it's like people say, well, I'll keep going. But it's like, well, you're starting to lose your power. So your speed and your power is not there after the first 3 reps. So what's the point of going 6, 7? Yeah, you can do 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, probably 11 reps, but they're starting to slow down. So you're not developing power throughout those reps. You're only developing them in the first 3 or 4 reps.
Yeah.
So then you rest and then you go again, and then you rest because you're actually trying to train the person to be powerful, which is that initial 1, 2, 3 reps hard.
Yeah, it's a good point.
If you keep going, by the time you get to 7, you start slowing down. But yeah, I can do another 2. Well, then you're talking, that's hypertrophy. You're just moving into trying to develop the muscle and not sort of develop the power. Yeah, another great thing I sort of read on the internet about MMA athletes is, they tend to be 3 types. They got the fighters, you got the competitors, and then you got the athletes. And they were saying that you've got to be top at 2 out of those 3 to become one of the world best, basically. Like a fighter, these guys and girls, not just guys, but guys and girls, they just want to fight. They just love to brawl. They'll fight at any weight. They'll fight anytime, anywhere, and they don't mind getting hit. And if they lose, they don't really bother as long as they've had a great scrap. And their way of judging, the results is if their opponent face looks worse than their face, then they're happy.
Yeah.
Then you got the competitors who are just more, they want to win at any cost. They just really hate losing. They hate even losing or winning if their form hasn't been correct or their skill isn't great, or they're not really fighters, but they just love competition. And the athletes are these freaks out there who are just super fit,
bit like me,
bit like you.
Yeah, Georges St. Pierre is the greatest example of that, I think.
Yeah.
GSP.
Yeah. Well, Kenny Colak was very, very much like this, and I watched a few videos on him not long ago, and it was called the rubber knee. He had something called the rubber knee because it always happened in his fight, and he got stopped a lot of the time because his knee basically bent backwards and round at an angle. But but he carried on, and it didn't hurt him.
Yeah.
But yeah, you do get some natural athletes who, it's genetics at the end of the day, but it's, some of them, the athletes, they're not particularly good fighters. They haven't got a great skill set, but they just got this insanely fit. They're super strong. They're super athletic, and they can just keep going. Got an engine. So,
and they get in the coaching now.
Yeah.
20, 30, 40 years ago didn't exist in MMA. I think that's important as well. Just going to bring Dave back in, Gary.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to change track slightly, Gary.
Yep.
So we talk about athlete motivation. How do you motivate athletes to get the best in their competitions and to reach their goals?
Personally, I a lot of my clients aren't athletes. So it's a hard one. It's, but I feel that motivating athletes, or even I've trained, don't get me wrong, they're not athletes, but I've trained my clients for triathlons, for 10K runs, half marathons, a variety of things. And to be honest, I think preparing correctly and them hitting targets during their training, that's good motivation for them. However, I am a firm believer of the 6 Ps. P poor preparation equals P poor performance, and it's been myself. If I've done a long ride, if I've planned to do a ride and I've not put the hours in, then don't expect to sort of perform well. So yeah, for athletes, the motivation really is to get a good plan in place, whether it's a race prep or whether it's fighting for a prep. So you've got to go back and throughout their training, just make sure that, they're hitting the targets that you've put in place for them before race day, before fight day. So proper nutrition, fueling, music is a massive motivator, so music or certain mantras, some of the notes I put down here, getting into a routine a pre-race routine. So you have the same breakfast. You make sure, you wear your favorite kit or certain things. If people are doing a running event, they don't put a new kit on or a new pair of trainers for the event, because the likelihood is then they're going to get some discomfort because it's something completely new and they haven't trained in it. So you wear your own gear. Yeah, so for example, golfers, I've got a few clients of mine are golfers, and we try and get them, strong in both directions, a lot of rotational work. And when they're going for a competition, we just try and make them have a little sequence before every shot. So they're thinking about the shot, they hold the club, they maybe nod the head, touch the club on the floor a couple of times, look a couple of times, and then you go through the same process every shot. So it's all about repetitive with the event becoming, the activity becoming almost subconscious. You do it automatically.
It's like a psychological warm-up, yeah?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it depends. If I felt, the person had problem with their motivation, then you've got to ask yourself the questions why. So the main things, you go back to the normal things, do a little checklist on sleep. Are they getting enough sleep? Because if they're not getting enough sleep, that's enough to demotivate anybody from training or from actually doing an event. Any stress in their life or extra stress than normal. Is their nutrition correct? Is their hydration correct? Sometimes you maybe sort of got a program in place and they're not particularly enjoying it. They're getting the right goals, they're getting the right motivation for the event or for the activity. So maybe changing the program, but you're still going to get the same results. Because like they say, there's methods are many, but concepts are few. So there's many methods to get someone fit on to do MMA, but the concept is getting that person fit to do MMA. Or there's lots of methods to get someone fit to be able to ride a 100-mile bike ride, sportif. But the concept is simple. You've got to have the endurance to do that event. So yeah, I think it's important to make sure that their training is correct, so that they're not, there's you're not overtraining. That's another thing. I think we're going to talk a little bit about supplementation and diet and everything else in a bit, but it's maybe they just need something. You need and it can even be a placebo. Say, oh, listen, this is something that's going to give you a bit of a kick in the mornings. It's going to get you working a little bit harder. And sometimes you just need to tweak it to give them that motivation. A lot of my clients come in, and when they walk through the door, you're thinking, crikey, Moses, does this person really want to be here? And then you have to think, right, if I do the same program that they used to, so you just spice it up a little bit, you change it slightly. And sometimes, changing the program is sometimes as good as the rest. If none of them work, then maybe they may just need a timeout. They may just need to sort of have a bit of timeout, do something completely different, refresh, and ask themselves, they need to go back to and revisit the reason why they're actually training, what their goal is, and then sort of reset that and start all over again. But yeah, there's a fine line between when you're training someone and trying to motivate someone, that the body changes through certain stresses. So whether it's resistance training, whether it's cardiovascular training, whether it's flexibility training, whether it's a combination of them all, you've got to put the body through certain stresses to get the adaptations to get better at whatever you're training for. So we call it functional overreaching. So you're basically, you're training, because we've all done it. It'd be great if you trained, went to bed, woke up the next day, super fresh, ready to train again. But you wake up the next day, you're probably aching a bit. But I'm not too bad. I can do something training, but maybe it's slightly different. So you keep training, and it's called functional overreaching. So you're training in slightly fatigued state, but you keep training. And then that's when you've got to sort of put it into a little block where, right, I'm going to do that for 3, 4, 5, maybe 6 weeks. And then you've got to have a bit of downtime. So this is where you reduce the volume, reduce the intensity slightly, where those adaptations then are going to take place, and then you get fitter and stronger. And then the whole cycle starts again. You know, usually with cycling, it was 3 weeks of hard training, 1 week recovery week, then it started again. So week 1 was slightly harder the second time round you hit week 1 than the first time. And the same with week 2 and same with week 3. Then you'd have your recovery week, and then you start the process again. So the third time you hit week 1, the volume, the intensity, and everything would go up slightly. It's just making sure that, because most people go into the gyms and they'll put a pin in, they'll put a weight on, and they'll think, oh, what do I feel like today? And, you know, they'll hit 10 reps, and, you know, they could have done probably 20 reps, or, you know, or maybe they've put an extra 5 on each side instead of putting an extra 2.5 on each side. So their training, their volume and intensity has gone up too quick. So it's just making sure that it's not non-functional overreaching. And that means you're doing that training in a fatigue state, but actually you're getting worse, you know, so you've got to put some measures in place to find out, A, how would you feel? B, are you actually getting better at what you're training for? And C, you know, are you improving? You know, is that end goal? So at the end of whatever training period, whether it's 6 months, 3 months, 12 months, are you actually going to hit that target? And if you're not, then you've got to rethink it, you know. So it's very unlikely that people do actually get into overtraining, what the class is overtraining principle. People think that, you know, if they don't sleep well, or they, you know, they're off their food a little bit, that, you know, or they're not making gains, that they're overtraining. So what do? They try and train harder, and they put more into it instead of thinking, well, maybe I just need to actually ease off a little bit, have a look at the program, tweak it slightly, and am I doing too much of the same thing, or do I need more work and time and effort on my recovery, which is a massive part of training. You know, the quicker you can recover, the quicker you can, put your body back through more stresses, and then the more adaptations that occur. So that's a simple fact. You know, the quicker you can train hard, recover quick, train hard, recover quick, you're going to get fitter, you're going to get stronger, whether it's strength, power, hypertrophy, cardiovascular fitness, whatever. So yeah,
I think that kind of touches upon my next question, Gary, which is, do you see people doing things in training that's holding them back? And are there things that you spot that you would change in people training? Let's use martial arts as an example that could help them progress more quickly.
I don't really have much to do with martial arts, but I think it's the same in every sport or every gym or everywhere you go. The key with training is consistency. You know, it's definitely consistency over intensity. You know, you say if someone came to me and said, listen, I go to the gym once a week and I can train for 4 hours really hard, but then that's only once a week. Or I can come to the gym 4 times a week and train for an hour. Well, you're obviously going to go for the second one, aren't you? You know, because that's going to give you far more benefits than just one all out. Because the likelihood is after hour 1 or 2, they're not going to be training as hard as they think they are anyway, because they're fatigued. So yeah, I see a lot of people in gyms, you know, they're burning the candle at both ends, basically. You know, they're training as hard as they can, almost to feed, almost to sort of offset being able to go out and eat and go out and drink what they want, which is putting way more stress on the system. You know, if they could limit both ends, they'd be far better off. You know, a lot of what I see is, you know, they're exercise dependent to substitute, I won't call them eating disorders, but eating issues. They go to the gym so they can burn a few calories and then go out and eat what they want, drink what they want at the weekends. But that's, you know, get me wrong, I'm not dissing those type of people. I think as long as you're doing some exercise, that's great. You're better off doing that than just going out and drinking and eating and not doing anything else. Yeah, so that's one of the main things. Not consistent enough. You know, it happens with my clients. You know, you see them regular for maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks, and then all of a sudden something crops up. One of the kids is ill, or you know, they've got a meeting that they got to go to, and you know, they just cancel a session like that, and you're thinking, are you joking me? You know, we've spent 3 or 4 weeks getting to your level of fitness. Or they throw in, oh, I'm having a week away, and you're thinking, right? But they pay you your wages, they pay you money, so all you got to try and do is give them something to do while they're away. I also think that, you know, I could probably walk into the gyms I used to train in years ago, and I bet you the majority of the guys who are still training there are still doing the same program. You know, they don't change their program regular enough. They don't take any objective measurements to see whether they're improving. But you know what? We're talking athletes who have got targets and goals, and then we're talking Joe Public, who I think is just great if they're exercising. You know, so you can't give them a hard time because, you know, they just don't know. There's so much information flying out there from, you know, what you see on these bloody YouTubes, what you see on these bloody Instagrams, feeding a load of BS, you know. So it's not surprising people are confused.
One, I just want to touch on this subject because from a martial arts point of view, Gary and Dave, I had a lad come to me in Southmorton about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and he's a white belt, and he's roughly the same weight as me, about 62 kilo. And he come to me and he said, what advice would you give me? And I said, I'll give you the same advice as I give everyone who's starting. 3 things. Enjoy what you're doing.
Yep.
Enjoy it. Second thing is, make sure if someone puts a lock on your joints, you tap early so you don't get injured. With chokes, spare them a little bit to condition your neck, but joints, tap early.
Yeah.
And the third thing is, last thing, is make sure that after you've enjoyed it, you've tapped early, that you can go home and then you can still put bread on the table and come back and just learn week in, week out, and don't expect anything for 12 months. Don't expect to be tapping everyone out within a week or 2.
Yeah.
You've got to give yourself at least 12 months, go to work, enjoy your life, and then come back in, week out. And after that 12 months, then start expecting to be hitting techniques. Them are the three that I give everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. It's like, you know, I know I'm going on a bit of a tangent here from martial arts, and because it's a long time since I did it. But you know, if I go back to table tennis, you know, the Chinese who, you know, they're the top in table tennis, women's, men's, kids, whatever. But they've got a little saying called 10K rule, and that's 10K rule means 10,000 hours, 10,000 hours practice, 10,000 hours at whether it's a backhand, whether it's a forehand, whether it's a serve, whether it's a return of serve, before you master something. Well, that's a lot of time. You know, if you divide that, but obviously these guys are training 8-10 hours a day.
Yeah.
So, you know, Joe Public, it's true what they say, practice makes perfect. But yeah, you know, you're exactly right. People want things instantaneously. They want to sort of walk into the gym, they come to a PT and they want to think that they, you know, if I got paid £1 for every time I took an induction and took someone through a program, and it was a female lady saying to me, but I don't want to develop muscles, you know, I'd be a rich man. And I'd be looking there thinking, well, believe me, you ain't going to develop that many muscles, you know, unless you're willing to put a hell of a lot of time, effort, supplementation, etc., etc., and dedicate your life to it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, Gary, thanks for all of your advice. We're going to bring the podcast to a close, mate. It's
Cool.
Dave, is there anything I forgot, mate?
No, that's covered everything. Thank you very much, Gary. Been a pleasure talking to you.
Okay,
Yeah,
I just want to finish with this. So, for all the listeners out there, whether you are looking to begin a healthy lifestyle through a new exercise program, or you just need motivation on your current regime, or if your goals are more sport specific, requiring a periodized approach to hit your targets, Gary at Placid Personal Training will evaluate, update, and invigorate you and your program. So, if you want to be with the best PTI in the North Wales area, everyone, then give him a ring, get in touch with Gary at Placid Personal Training. Gary, thanks for your time, mate. It's
no
been
problem.
an honor.
Yeah,
Thank you very much.
Cheers, buddy. Thanks,
Okay.
Dave. Cheers, Gav.
Cheers.
Good night, everyone.
Right.
There's a brand new podcast on the scene talking all things martial arts. If you've never seen a podcast, it's a brilliant place to start. So like, subscribe or download to the best thing on the net. Yes, he really is that tiny. Please do not adjust your set. You can watch it on your telly. You can listen on the go. Tell all your friends and family. Tell everyone you know. Feel free to leave a comment. Tune in, give us a share. The only host that I know gets his keys from Build-A-Bear. The Gavin Davis Podcast. The Gavin Davis Podcast. Jump on board, we'll have a real blast on the Gavin Davis Podcast. A captivating podcast streaming straight into your house. He's a little pocket rocket. He's the Welshman's mighty mouse. Great guests and conversations that won't bore you to tears. Thank God he's wearing headphones to hide those grapplers' ears. Gavin Davis Podcast. The Gavin Davis Podcast. Jump on board, we'll have a real blast